Hello, friends. Hi, I'm Praful. With me, Kenny. Hi, Kenny.
Hey, Prabhu. So what do you have there? It's a to-do list?
Yes, it is a simple to-do application we have built, and we'll go through all the steps to create this to-do application today.
Yeah, but then I think people will ask why did you make a to-do list?
Yeah, to-do list is a good starting point. We would like to
Hmm.
create more projects, but this is a good starting point for us to set up all the necessary bits and pieces.
So I think the point is that we want to um, try and figure out the process about how to go from an idea to an actual finished product, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Before we dive into more detail, let us show the demo to our friends, like how it will work. It is a very basic application, so we can talk about more about that, how we build it. So here we have an input field. We can write tasks or to do. So like we can create as many tasks as you want, right?
Yeah.
And if you click this checkbox, this task will be checked, striked out. That means it is completed, and go to the button.
Yeah.
And we can have the ability to delete the task as well. On the hover, this delete button is appearing. If you click it, it will go away. This is a simple to-do application, but lots of things going under the hood. We'll try to explain in detail about in the coming few minutes.
Yeah.
So about, can you give a little bit intro, Kenny? Like what are our thought process about how we came up with these ideas, and what are the minimal viable thing we decided to do it, and what is the output of objective of our doing this thing?
Yeah. So the thought process is how we can consistently like through small efforts every day, how we can go from thinking about having an app of any scale and going through a certain process which will enable us to get to the end product, right? And for that we have just come up with these few items. So for example, first we have the idea, then when we build a wireframe, then we actually expand on that wireframe to get the UI design. Then we think about the technical stack and also the final development. So through following this current process over the past week, we have been meeting for an hour every day. And that is how we have gotten to this demo that we are seeing. Right.
Yeah, so we spend a good amount of 1 hour daily. That's a bit good working together, Kenny. We learned a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So this idea is very simple. So because we are also trying to learn this process or understand how to refine the process, we took a very basic and very simple idea where we just want a simple to-do app, and we restricted all the features to the very essential features like creating a task, deleting a task, and marking the task as done. So the purpose of this is not to have like a full-fledged to-do app like many of the things that we have already seen online, but just so that we can understand by building this software, we can understand the different aspects of the process and get familiar with the process so that we are enabled to continue creating bigger and bigger projects of more complexity. Full day, want to walk through the wireframe and the rest of it?
Yes, sure. So the starting point is that noting down that feature or the story. So before you dive into creating any visual representation, so it is recommended to write your thoughts or your ideas in in notepad or pen and paper, whichever the medium you're comfortable. You can highlight some of the features, story in a little bit detail as minimum, or whatever the detail you want to approach. And after that, there is a very important step. This is the stage we use the Figma, which is
Yes.
freely available for most of the doing basic kind of drawing, and it allow like multiple people to collaborate together, like Kenny myself did, and to come up with this wireframe.
Just to interrupt you there, Praful, like that collaboration aspect definitely I think adds a lot of value, because we are not sitting together, right? So when we are both logging into Figma and we are both able to see what each other is doing and we are able to see the cursor, so you can focus on one task and I can focus on another task within that same way. And so that collaboration definitely made things less boring, I would say, or much more interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kenny.
Yeah.
So coming to the wireframe, this no need to be done in a a Figma. You can choose to do with Figma, but you can use a simple pencil and paper, and you can sketch out a couple of your screen. It no need to be detailed, or it may not be accurate how your application looks like. If you see our the final product, it looks more or less same because we are dealing with a simple application. But even though it will divert, it doesn't articulate that complete output or the design at this stage. It is all fine. This is to come up with some kind of bold elements, like we need some input box, or we need the list of the items. So that is what it should give a high level of picture, like how many screen, what are the important feature. So you can use there are variety of tools available to create wireframe, but we using Figma, and this is just to roughly sketch out over your ideas.
And it makes sure that both of us are on the same page, because I might be imagining something and Praful might have a different idea, but until we have this representation out, then we won't be able to get one common idea. And there may be cases when if there are like wildly different ideas, I mean, it could definitely add in terms of being a feature also. So those brainstorming definitely adds a lot of value.
Yeah, exactly, Kenny. So this will help us to streamline and finalize that limited amount of specs we want to do, considering the timeline and all this thing, because we don't want to be too much long and don't want to squeeze lots of feature. So this will give us a good starting point, I would say. And the next step would be like Figma design. So do you want to explain about your experience with this, Kenny?
Yeah, Praful. So this usually what we would do, because we are developers, is we will just open VS Code and start coding something in terms of UI, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But having this kind of a basic wireframe, and then from there, when we started working on this kind of a simple UI, it gives us like a common point of reference that we both know exactly what we should be building. And it is like how I feel is like it's two different tasks, right? Designing is one task and development is a different task. So when we try to merge it together in our development workflow, then it becomes a little tricky. We do things randomly, or we have like infinite ways to do the same thing, right? So this helped us to narrow down the scope and also the look and feel, colors, and the shapes. Like we needed a card and then header element, and all these items we were able to design it out. And we had help also, right, Praful?
Yeah, I also like to shout out with Binay. He's one of our friend who also joined as part of design process and contributed towards nourishing this design for us.
Yeah, exactly. So like as a developer, I don't think people would be expecting us to create awesome designs, but I think Vinay has a little bit more of a design angle. So he was able to help us flesh out a few of these things that also we were doing similarly collaboratively. So, and I think, Praful, you were mentioning some refactoring UI, some book or something that was useful, right?
Yes, I would recommend like the refactoring UI. If you Google, or we'll give the link to the below. So that that book is very essential. It is not very complicated because for the developer oriented. So it gives like a couple of to-dos for what is best practice in the design scale. It is not very elaborate book in the design philosophy of principle, but giving a pointed advice how you can make a little bit better about your design. You can't be a designer overnight, but it makes it looking this UI element a little bit pleasant to eyes.
Yeah, it's not for designers who want to be core designers, but for developers like us who just want to get some design idea. So it just gives us some few tips and things to avoid and things to do. So that is definitely a value add.
Yeah, so this Figma process is very essential. So this we try to match the final product as much as possible, but we have not done 100% exactly match. That is fine. When we can dive it a little bit. For example, we don't have edit button functionally. We decided later that that is not needed. We don't have the circle radio button, but it is all fine. But having a one design which really help us during the development hours, so we can concentrate. We don't need to worry about making our design pretty in the development phase. So this is definitely helpful the process.
Yeah.
And also, like we have used this one of the dribble post for our design inspiration. Like in the dribble side is very popular site where lots of people post beautiful designs. So by searching, I found this element. So we try to inspire or use a couple of elements from this dribble source as well.
Yeah, and I think that is another essential part that we don't need to come up with something by ourselves. We should always try to get some inspiration from other places, and this was really useful for helping us getting a minimum starting point. And from that, we were able to customize based on what we felt was better for our situation, right, Praful?
Yeah, that's true. Now we discuss about that normal process. I think we have shown a little bit demo. Now let us discuss about the technical stack. What are the technical stack we have decided to use and how we approach with that. So can you talk about the technical stack a little bit, Kenny?
Yeah. So initially we were thinking about how to approach the front end and how to approach with the API and yeah, the IDE and GitHub also. So for the front end, we just went with React because both of us are already familiar with React, and we also went with a TypeScript base because I think both of us agree that TypeScript is the current and the future. So anyone who is looking to get any job in a company would be expecting to be knowing TypeScript. And Tailwind is a very interesting approach to CSS, where we don't have to write CSS ourselves, but we use some utility classes that are already written for us. And we were both again familiar with it, so that we could just quickly prototype something. And I think Tailwind is a very good way that we don't have to think too much about colors or think too much about getting the radius, like border radius or pixels correct or anything like that. We can just use the things that they have. So that is it for the front end. For the storage, we initially thought about getting some mock API, like where we could actually do some API request and do it. But as it progressed, we felt like okay, we will just go for browser local storage, which is easy enough to get started, and that way we could because it's a beginning project, we could just limit to the front end side only, right? Then again for the IDE, then we went with VS Code, and we wanted to use Prettier and ESLint for code formatting and linting. Then we have NPM as usual, and then pair programming, which was particularly new to me. And Praful, do you want to talk more about it?
Yeah, this is a bit interesting thing we experimented. Like we use one extension of VS Code, LiveShare, and that is a Microsoft created plugin, so that we both can. I have the setup in my machine, but it is all the same file in the my machine. Kenny can able to edit in his VS Code, and it is extremely fast. We don't see any latency, and we had a very good experience. Would like to continue on future as well, right, Kenny?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like perfect. It's better than pair programming in person, because in person, if we are sitting together, one person will be doing all the typing. This is like both of us have our own option to type, and so we will just be on the call and we'll just talk about this. And like if Profile was encountering some error or bug, then I would go and look at that code and or vice versa. So we were just quickly doing it, and it was a very interesting experience. So yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
Profile.
true. And coming to the next topic, like we have all this code we put in the GitHub. So this link will give in the description below. So you can clone this repo, and you can do cd to to-do folder. I'll show the folder structure in a minute. So you can do npm I for npm install and npm start. Then the to-do application will be open in your Chrome browser. So this is very simple steps. So you can use it to, you know, get itself running and play around with this code after our video.
Yeah.
Now let's discuss about the application. And also before we jump into that application aspect of it, like we have created a boilerplate code. So initially we created a boilerplate, one basic base setup. This will create a separate video, how we install and how we set up the Tailwind, ESLint, Prettifier and all this thing. But this we don't want to dive today. But we have the README file available. So all the instruction is provided into this GitHub repository. So you guys can have a look on that. But assuming that we have basically set up ready, so we'll dive into the application code, how we arrange it, how we architect it, and develop the code. So before we dive into showing the code aspect of it, we'll just show the very high level 2 diagram. Then we'll straight rightly go into the code directly and show you the code pieces of it. So can you talk about it? How we organize our code in our application?
Yeah. So this is essentially how the final files or the different component structure that we have come resulted in. And we have the default app.tsx, which is like present in any React app. And then we created a to-do list component, which is embedded inside that. So the to-do list TSX is handling all the responsibilities for state, and it is handling all the operations that I think we'll come to in the next diagram. But the to-do list is containing again the to-do new, which is essentially our text box for entering the to-do content that we saw in that demo. And that will just capture the text and provide it to to-do list, which will add it to that array. And below that, we have a list which is composed of to-do items. So the to-do item is essentially just making sure that the to-do are presented in the correct visual format.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. So we built 3 components here: the to-do list, to-do new, and to-do item, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now let's dive into
and also
bit.
Just
go ahead, Kenny.
Just to add on one more item that when we started and when we were coding it, we did not have it in this like a perfect structure or anything. We started out with just a to-do list, and everything we dumped into that one file when we were doing that live coding. So after that only we refactored it to make it into separate files. So I think that is also capturing an important part of the process, that we don't need to be perfect in terms of coding in the first try. We can just put everything in a single file. But for maintenance, we will eventually want to move it out into separate files.
Yeah, we created one file, but from the beginning only we try to give this component name differently, so it would be making refactor easy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now coming to this architecture. So as we decided, this is the important piece we have decided: browser local storage. So we talk about whether to create the real API or not, or whether to use some mock API. So in the future, we'll definitely use some kind of API. We'll use AWS serverless or some Node.js base API. We'll create real API backend. So just to give a feel. But as this project is mostly front-end specific, and so we have not using the API integration as such. So we have used the browser local storage, which would be available if you close the browser, or if you reload the pages, or if you come next day also, all the to-do list will be available. So you can get some transient data. You can't rely on that, if you clear the case or history, it will go away. But still it is good to show for demo and for understanding purpose. So even though in the real life project also, a lot of facility being used in the browser local storage. This is one important piece, but it is very simple one. So here there are two API expose. One is get, one is set. So it is a key value pair. So value would be always string representation of our this data structure. So what is the to-do list? Maybe it is a list array of object. So we serialize or convert to string and put it into this browser storage. When we need it, we just retrieve it. That is how we deal with the browser local storage. And to-do list, whenever we render this page first time, right? So first time we just load from this browser local storage. We get the data and render this to-do item. So this to-do item will be created if we have like 5 to-dos available in the local storage. So 5 items will be displayed one by one. And we have a like component to do new or TXT. Here we have input field. We have like variable to deal with to-do list, to-do text. Whenever we make any changes into the input box, so this value will be updated. And whenever user press enter or the form is get submitted, at that time this create to do application will be created. Here is one important design decision we have made. We could have directly manipulated to dos over here by passing and doing some way approach, but we are not doing that kind of thing. So we make our other component very small or lightweight, and only all the interaction with the state we put into the to-do list code base. This is our fed component, or this is our controller kind of thing, where our bulk of the logic available. And this will be only the rendering of the screen level component, very minute level component. So whenever we submit the form, so to-do text will be passed. So create to-do will be created. And this to-do's array will be updated. And this browser local storage also will be reflected with the new update changes. So the next time we reload, so the changes will be there, the new item. Similarly, to do item, we have two functions. One is delete to do. Like whenever we delete it to do, so it won't directly delete that to do item or to do's. It will just pass this to do ID to that to do's list, and the array will be one item will be deleted from that. And the local storage will be reflected. Similarly, with the complete status, it will pass this to-do ID, and that particular item will be fetched, and the status will be changed. And also immediately the local storage will be updated. This is how this all three components will hang together. And Kenny, do you want to add anything here?
I think you've covered everything. This is the overview.
Okay, that's nice. Now let's dive into the code a little bit. The main.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to explain this code structure a bit, Kenny?
Sure. So this is like a typical React app structure that we have here. And we have inside docs is what we have added the documentation markdown files. And in node modules, we have our node modules, which we are not committing to Git. Then public is our index HTML and like the basic web page content there is there. Then in source is our actual application content. Do you want to talk about the config files, Prabhat?
Yeah, I think we'll create another video, but just for simplicity, this kind of couple of config files we use. So this is the ESLint. This is to establish some set of standard rules based. It is very common in the JavaScript TypeScript based project. So it will identify some errors and helpful for troubleshooting purpose. And we have pretty file with this configuration file. So this will automatically format the code, It will ensure that line width is 80 and it will do single code or not, double code or not. It will make life very easier. We don't need to intend by hand. I spent lots of my programming life in intending the code, but this is really helpful. Once you save, automatically this prettifier is coming to action.
Yeah, and it is also useful because each person might be typing the code in a different way, but this will make sure everything is looking consistent.
Yeah, that's true. And this package.json is very standard file. Like here we have a set of dependency. Like Krakow, I'll explain a little bit. This is same as React application or React script. For Tailwind, we need this. It is documented well. And when we create like one boilerplate code, right, we'll discuss more about it. So it's React TypeScript, and that is pretty much it. So we have dev dependency Tailwind. These are some few plugins is needed for Tailwind. So this we created a boilerplate code. So this is very basic setup, and we just copied it and converted it to Todo. So we won't dive into too much configuration. Like there is a Tailwind config, is the default config, and TS config also default one. So whenever we create a dedicated video for boilerplate, Kenny, we'll talk more in detail. Otherwise, this video will be lengthy one.
All right.
Okay. Now, can you start with that app.js file?
Yeah. So just like we saw in that diagram, so we have the app.tsx file, and it is importing our to-do list from that to-do list tsx file. So here you can see that we have some basic. I'm talking as if everyone knows React, but I'm assuming people know some level of React. So we have the function app, which is essentially the app component, and the return value is what will be rendered for that app component. And within that, we are saying we have a div, and that class name section is where we're seeing the Tailwind, the classes that are provided by Tailwind. So we are just giving it some basic centering and margin top to make sure it looks like centered in the page. And then we have importing the to-do list, and we are embedding that. So can we look at the to-do list profile?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. This Tailwind classes are really coming handy. So these are some utility classes. We have not written any CSS file here. This is by default it is coming. Even though we just commented out, it will still work. So these are this is like flex box, and to the center our box, right, Kenny?
Yeah.
And this is empty margin top 20. So we'll have some gap in the top. That's how this box is centered.
Yeah, so right now our box is centered in the horizontal direction, but not in the vertical direction. Vertical direction is a small space that we've given at the top.
Yeah. So here the margin 20 we given here.
Yeah. That too is 20 does not mean anything specific in terms of a pixel count or a rem count. That is I think you'll have to dive into Tailwind to figure out what the actual value is.
Yeah, that is a relative rem. If you hover the mouse, I think it will come. It should come actually, but not coming. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, Praful, you want to take this?
Yeah. So here, like to-do list. This is the initialization. This is the to-do array. This is the main array we have, where all our data model is getting stored. This is a list of to-do object. If you see the to-do object, and to-do, as we said, we are using TypeScript for defining or annotating our types. This is very much helpful. So let me go into the to-do. This contains 3 fields. One is ID as a number required. Text is complete, Boolean. So this to-do list will contain this array of to-do, right? And we'll discuss about this a little bit later, the impact of use effect, maybe the last part. So we have the 3 different functions. We'll talk about more slowly. And this is the rendering part. So here our all HTML element and hang together well. So can you start, Kenny, with the rendering part?
Yeah. So
maybe you just want to touch upon that Tailwind also a little bit. People who are new to Tailwind, they can get some idea like why we did what we did.
Got it. Yeah. So as we saw seen in that overview diagram. So we have our to-do list, and within that is everything is happening. So here we have everything enclosed within a div, which has class name for background white. And background white, BG dash white means that the
So you
background
are
for
referring
that
this
div
white
should be
background,
white.
right? In this case, the to-do list behind this box background.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So right now we are talking about that entire card. So in order to get a shadow, we can give shadow, use the shadow class. So that has like medium or other options also. So there's a slight shadow there.
Yeah, I think we have auto completion here. Let me try it.
Ah.
Oh, but I have not started my server. We can start the server. Sorry to interrupt you, Kenny.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes it that plugin is not doing that job.
No, I have not started my server because I was deployed this into Vercel. We'll talk about in the last part. Yeah, go ahead. We can skip for now. So shadow, we can have like different shadow, right?
Yeah, so I think MD and LG on all is available.
We have MD, and usually autocomplete works, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah. And the point is, even if it doesn't work, we can just look at like we can just open a Google and search Tailwind shadow. So it will direct us to the correct documentation page, and there we can just look up what are required classes and then give it. So that way, this is adding a lot of value, because otherwise we would be spending time writing CSS to generate the shadow, right?
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that itself is like an experimentation process. We give different value, we spend a lot of time on it, but this is like you already have the shadow ready.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that is useful. Then we have that is width 2x5. So it is like taking 2/5 of the width of the entire page.
So it is not pixel, right? So this is a relative thing. So it may be responsive by design.
I think it is percentage wise that it is taking. So 40% essentially is what 2x5 is coming to.
So if I have full screen. So here also it is looking better. We have not planned it for making responsive, but it is looking decent.
Yeah, it is responding with the screen. Yeah. So that is the width aspect, but otherwise, it will be like random, right?
Yeah.
Without giving a minimum width, then it will be random. Then yes, that is P8 is for padding 8, which makes it look a little nice. So if you come to that website, there is a good amount of white space around that in that card, right?
Yeah, this
evenly all across.
Yeah, to-do list and the top one, this gap and this gap, and bottom gap
Left,
and
yes,
right gap. So
bottom.
it is same. So it is not 8 pixel, right? It is a relative 8, 10 is a relative
it is
number.
A relative unit. Yes, I think -4 becomes a 1 rem, and I think this -8 would become like a 4 rem or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so we
It's there
just
in the
give the number,
documentation.
whichever is filled right, we just use it.
Yeah, I think it is more about us being in a consistency that if we use 4 in padding, we will use 4 in padding everywhere, like to make it look consistent, right?
Yes, yes. And what about this, Kenny?
Then that is used for getting that. So typically a div will have a square corner, right? So this is giving us the rounded corners. So you can see it looks like a card kind of a view. That edges are the vertices are the vertices.
Yeah.
The corners are a radius, have a radius.
Yeah.
So that also typically we would just give in CSS, but since it is already implemented, it was easier for us to just use it.
Yeah. So this is the how this is the to-do list, right?
So that part is the actual heading. And the funny thing in Tailwind is even if you give a H1, it won't look like a H1. You have to tell it has to be a text to Excel.
Yeah.
And make it a font bold.
I also surprised because of that.
So,
I was assuming that H1 will looks the text bigger by itself. But it doesn't.
Yeah. But I think we can, if we wanted to make all H1 look the same, then I think some configuration might be able to do it, but we haven't looked into it yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So then we have just a line with a margin top of 2.
Yes.
That is like a small line there. Yeah. Then we come to our actual to do new component, which is showing that text box, and we can enter the task, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that profile, or do you want to cover the remaining and then go back to it?
Yeah, remaining we'll just try to cover in a high level. Then we'll go into the to do new and to do item.
All right. Okay. So then under that to do new, we are having a section which says you have n pending tasks. Okay. So how that is computed? Do you want to explain that part of code, Praful?
Yeah, it's a, if you see here, you have, this is complete text, but this one is a variable, the number. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tasks, but 2 are complete and 4 are pending. So it is a basic loop. This is an array. Here we have defined as a use state variable, right? To-dos, which contain that list of to-dos. So we are filtering it. This is there are different way we can do that, but filtering, this is the functional programming style. And I think this is Kenny got inspired by Kotlin, and he started using it. But you can give to do here. If I could have written, I could have given to do here. But anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So here using arrow syntax, IT is complete is false. So only whichever the task to do has this is completed is false. So that count is length is count. This will return an array, and we are getting dot length. So it will calculate the number of to-dos which is not completed. So that's why this 4 number is being appearing here.
Yeah.
So if this code is getting complicated, you can wrap it into a different function and use it. But this code is a simpler one. So we have embedded as an expression here itself.
Yeah, we can also have it like assigned to a variable before the return, and then just inject that variable also. That also works.
Yeah. So can you proceed into and explain this logic, Kenny?
Yeah. So now the remaining section essentially, even though we are seeing it as 2 sections, it visually is essentially looking the same. So the idea is that we want to separate the completed ones from the not completed to-dos. Earlier, when we were, earlier we did not have this separation. So whenever we check mark a completed to do, it will stay in the same position because it is just check marked and there is no movement. So in this case, what we're doing is the first section we see is filtering and showing only the ones that are not completed. So that is the filter that we are seeing. It is completed equal to false. So that will give us the list of to-dos which are not completed. Then for each of those items, we are using the map function and then putting that into the to-do item list, right? So we are converting that into each of the to-do items. So that is the second component that we will dive deep into like after this. And similar idea for the bottom section that, we are also saying if it is actually completed, we will do the same thing essentially. In terms of visibility that we will separate that completed ones to the bottom. And yeah, Profolio mentioned that you have the delete to do function and the complete function, which we have mentioned when we are passing in the top of the file, right?
Yeah. So we'll come to again that later when we started discussing about to do item, then we'll try to link it and come with the implementation, how we handle it here.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's start with the to do new item.
Yeah.
So if you open to do new item, to do new. So there are some bunch of default imports, nothing fancy over here. Here we are using one icons. See, I'll just show that icons here. We just created icons. This is a set of SVG file. For getting the icon, we use like hero icons, which is really a very good website. So here, any icon you want, you click it. So you can click SVG and JSX. So we copied using JSX. It is same as SVG, but it will little bit this class, it will change the name or something like that. So we don't need to format it as per JSX syntax. It will do that. We'll just copy paste here so that icon will be created. And you can change this stroke color to here, or size you can manipulate, or height, width. But you don't need to change too much about it, only if you need it. Mostly I change this color as per our color theme. And this you can use it as any other component. And this is a bit important. This is like TypeScript code. Here we can use interface or type. We can use interchangeably. But to do new properties, so this is the property is our component will expect. This is one required attribute, create to do. But if you see this structure is a little bit different, it is a function, or sometimes we call as a callback function. So the function, what to do once we calling, that implementation is done in the to-do list. So this particular to-do new item, depending upon its few of the activity, so it will call this create to-do application and pass this to-do text. So basically to-do new item, this is function will be passed from the to-do list item, sorry, to-do list. I'm not sure why I'm talking about item, but item we are not yet started looking into.
Yeah.
So to-do new, this is the interface like create to do, and that function no need to return anything, it return void. So here we are using like one simple variable as a string variable to do text. So it is not to do, it doesn't have the ID or status. It doesn't worry about how that is handled. So it is a simple form. On submit, we are calling this submit function. And class name, just we given for relative, just to position this plus circle here in the right hand side, making it absolute. Top 5, right 3, we just position it to this right side so that it look pretty. It doesn't do anything as such, just a visual element. And this is suggested by Vinay.
Yeah.
And input, we have a placeholder task, type as a text, and value is the standard. Value we bind it to do text. But because the React is one-way binding, this very beginner do this mistake. Even though you associate this to do text, right? Once you type the value won't get reflected immediately. Just to make the value reflected, you have to bind this onChange handler, and you have to set this to do text hook or function using this e-targeted value. Then that to do text will contain this live data, whatever you are typing. And in this submit, we are preventing default. Otherwise, it will open another page or some undesirable behavior will happen in some browser. So create to do, and we are just clearing up this to do text. So in this create to do, once we pass this to do text, right? So it will call this particular function. And one important thing I missed to explain before to do item. During the initialization, right? So to do initial value is an empty array. But whenever we initialize it, we are doing some kind of lazy initialization. So for each rendering, this won't be executed. It will be executed only once. So to-do list we are getting from window.localStorage.get item by passing this key as a to-dos. This is how the interaction with this local storage will happen. This is a very simple, this is not React specific. This is a simple JavaScript DOM behavior. Window is a global object, dot local storage, and dot get item. You pass the keys, right? So you get as a string, this string representation of to-do list. So here we are checking it is undefined or not. If it is contains some value or the length is greater than 0. I think this length we're just comparing the string length. We are not comparing that array length. Okay.
Yeah.
So the initial value, we are just parsing this JSON.parse to-do list. So this in this case, the to-do list will contain the string representation. This initial value will contain the object, JavaScript object, or to-do array to be precise. And this initial value will be stored as a to-dos list or to-dos item. Oh, sorry, the model.
Yeah. Praful, can you just show that local storage data? Maybe
Yes,
that
sure,
will help.
sure.
So in Chrome, we can able to inspect using the inspector, the developer tools, that we can see the local storage data that we are saving. So we'll be able to see the content that already has been written, and it is essentially like a JSON format, and it will have an array with the to-dos, which are each of the items that we are seeing in the screen.
In this inspector tab, like we have to go to the application, local storage, and this I have run some other applications. So we are seeing some different keys, but this is the key for to-do application and to-do list. Here, if you see that below, this is string representation of that object. So this many to-do we have, like 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is completed is true for below 2 and false is for other 4.
Yeah. So I think it is stored as a string, but in that example, it was showing the final representation, right?
Yeah, so it looks like a JavaScript object. Yeah, it looks like a JSON structure, but it is actually a string representation of JSON object.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain about the create to do, Kenny? I think from here we got that create to do. Handle create to do.
So we were saying, yeah, the to do new, within that we were saying on submit, we are taking the text that was entered and passing it to the handle create to do as the argument in that function. So if we come to that, if we scroll up to that. Yeah. So what is happening here is, so we need to add an item to the existing to do array, but we first need to make a copy of that array, because in terms of state, it is recommended to create a update using a new object. So here we are making a copy of that array by using the spread operator. So we are calling it old to-dos, and in old to-dos, it's a new array having the same data, and we are pushing that new item. And in the new item, we include the ID, which we are generating using a random number generating. So that is going to give us some kind of a random number, which might be, I think, little large number. And then the text, we are putting that argument data that we're getting, that is to do text. And by default, we are saying is completed is false. And then after that, we are setting the to-dos using the set to-dos function and passing in that array. So that way, that state gets updated. And when the state is updated, that entire list also gets updated.
Yeah. So do you want to start explaining about to-do item, Kenny?
Yeah, sure. So this to-do item, it is taking in. So the key is like a React thing. So in order to, whenever we are doing like a map and putting some items, we have to provide a key, which is like a unique identifier for each of the item, so that React is able to correctly update the screen if any items are changing. Then for the item, we are passing that IT as the current item. And for handling these item changes, we are providing the delete, to do, and complete, which are already defined in this to-do list file. So shall we look into that to-do item?
Yeah, let's go into the item.
Finally, the item comes up.
Yeah. So here
Yeah,
we define some
so-
type.
Yeah, Praful, go ahead.
No, you start explaining about the type first.
All right. Yeah. So this to-do item component, we are having the interface of to-do item props here. So what it is saying is, for that component, we are expecting a variable with the name item, which is of the type to do. And then we are expecting two functions. One is the delete to do and the complete. So both of these functions are the ones we have already defined in the to-do list, which is the parent component. And we are passing that in when we saw in the previous section. And those three items that are being, those parameters are being passed into the function that we are seeing below, which is the actual component function. So we can see that item, delete, to do, and complete are available in the function arguments. Then we have, so the only main reactive thing there is, I think, that delete button visibility. So that is why we are setting that use state for the showing the delete button or not. And whenever we are mouse is entering that to do item div, we have the on mouse enter function. So whenever the mouse is entering that to do item, it is going to enable that state variable. When the state variable is enabled, we will be showing that delete button. So that is that function call, which is setting the state. And then in that button, we are just saying if the show date button is enabled, like true, only then we are showing the button. So that is the basic about that. And that button we can see on click is defined, and it will be doing delete to do function with giving the item ID. So this delete to do was earlier we mentioned, it is passed in from the to do list item, not the to do list item, the to do list. And that is being called here. So that is for the delete button.
And this delete is just kind of icon. We could have used better naming. Like same as the SVG file, we have used like delete icon here, copied from hero icons.
Yeah, got it.
Yep. Yeah, proceed. Continue. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have the actual visible part of it, that is like default visible. We have the input, which is the checkbox on the left side. And then we have the text for the actual to do data. So the input item, we are saying if the item is completed, we have to enable the checked parameter. So that checked equal to item dot is completed, which will either show the checkbox or be, it will be checked or not checked, depending on the is completed state. And for that checkbox, we are giving the on change also. Yeah, Praful?
Yeah, so this is from the item directly, right? You have not defined any variable here in this component. So this is coming from this to-do list, and we're directly checking that that particular to-do item is completed or not. Okay.
Yeah, and on change, we are saying like when the user is checking or unchecking that item, we want to mark that, call that complete function. So we are giving that item ID, and that definition is in the to-do item, which is the parent component. We'll look at it after this.
Yeah, to-do list.
To-do list. I am also using item. Okay, yeah. Then we have the actual text content. And what we have in the class name is, if the text content is like, if the to-do item is completed, then we are applying the Tailwind line through class. Otherwise, it is not applying any class. So I think that is how we are seeing the strike through.
And we don't have any functionality over here, just kind of bunch of HTML and Tailwind classes and button toggle. This is just to show that delete button as explained by Kenny. But if you see, there is no much logic here.
Yeah. Actual logic is happening in the to-do list.
Yeah. So here, create to-do application explained by Kenny, and delete to-do and complete to-do, this two function is implemented here, to-do list. And this will be called from this section, delete to-do. See here, we are not directly the to-do item will be passed, this function reference we are given. So the to-do ID will be passed to both of the function. And here also the same two function we are getting called. So in the handle delete to do, as we just want to make immutable, we just taken a copy of it and we get an index of the to do item, to do ID. Using the find index, this is the array. We're using find index particular function. And it will loop through all this particular element of to dos. And wherever this ID is matching, right, that particular index it will return. So this index will 0 to some to-do list length -1. And using the splice, we're deleting this particular index, and this is the number of element we want to delete. So we are deleting only one element. So this to-do, using the splice, we are deleting it. And the updated to-dos, we are setting it to to-dos. Can you explain this complete function, Kenny?
Yeah. So similarly, we are making a copy first of the to-dos, and then we are trying to find which to-do item it is that the user has marked as complete. So we have as argument the to-do ID, which was supplied to us. And from that, we are trying to find the current to-do item that was selected. And then we are also saying, okay, what is the index for that item? That is the next one, selected to-do index. So yeah, if we can find that selected to-do item, what we're saying is in that updated to-do array of that particular index location, what we want to do is we want to create a new object and store it there. And the new object content is we are using the spread operator to expand all the items that were already in that selected to-do object. And then after that, we are saying the is completed field, if it exists, it has to be the opposite of the current value for that is completed field. So the idea is that if the user was already checking an empty, like unchecked to-do. So for example, if the to-do was not completed and the user is clicking on the checkbox, then we want it to be the opposite. That is, we want it to be completed. And same way, for completed to do, if we click, it has to be the opposite, that is uncompleted.
Yeah, so this is a piece of code, like if you check it, toggle it.
Yeah.
So this is the behavior handle. Only the piece of code is this much. We have to write lots of lines of code to make it working.
Yeah.
And one important aspect, Kenny, each time our to-do list is objected, we are not changing the local storage. So this is the section. This is like React hooks, very confusing or complicated concept to understand. It is not that complex, but it is sometimes in large application it get confusing sometime. But basically what do you do? In the create to do also we are changing these to-dos, and delete to do also we are deleting to-dos, and complete also we are changing this to do. So this particular function, whatever we write, right, will be executed each time this to-dos is getting changed. This is not a dependency array. Here we given only one dependency. So this particular function or React will monitoring these to-dos. So whenever it is changing, so we are using this window.local storage set item. This is the keys. And we have to convert this to-do object or array to the stringify version. This is the stringify because this will take only string and assign into to-dos. this is where that our data will be stored. And if you don't have this use effect function, then we have to use some different function and call in each stage. So
Yeah.
this is comes handy in this case. Only we have to, but we have to understand, like, depending upon which interaction this is getting called.
Yeah.
For the simpler, it
So
is making
essentially-
more sense. But once application grows complex, then we don't know, because we change in one place which is getting affected and how it is affecting other part of application.
Yeah, in this case, I think essentially what we are trying to convey is that whenever Todo is changing, we want to update to the local storage. So that is, we are writing in a very nicer way rather than having to call the function every time after handle create to do or handle delete or completion, right?
Yeah, that's right, Kenny. So I think for today we completed most part, and we'll create some other tutorial for Boilerplate Code, how we set up and what are the experience we have. So you guys can go, we already uploaded into GitHub, so you guys can check out and run the code. So we'll create more of these videos. Please leave your comment how you like this approach. Anything you want to add, Kenny?
Yeah, so it has been a very good learning experience for me also, just going through this process. And the main highlights for me were that we have a streamlined step-by-step process for starting from an idea and getting to the final product. And in between, whatever we were doing it like a collaborative way. So every day we will meet at the same time and like sit on it together. So that definitely makes it a little more fun than, you know, simply doing it alone. So I think that has added a lot of value, and without doing that, I don't think we would have finished this in like a week. We would get bored in between and just stop and do something. That
Yes.
I think is the main takeaway for me.
Yeah, this is a good learning experience for both of us. And let's see, we create a few more videos, so it may be helpful for
Yeah.
other beginners and other people who are interested into project-based coding. Please leave your comment, guys. Have a good day ahead.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.